joining a webinar for Redesigning School Counseling. At this webinar, we'll be doing the preparation for Advisory Council Meeting 5, which is the Advisory Council meeting on expanding resources. I'm just having one technical difficulty here. Let me see why that's happening. There we go. Okay, so today's agenda, we'll begin very quickly just reviewing, as we always do at the beginning, looking at our foundational beliefs for redesigning school counseling, and also quickly going through the process, but then really looking at where does Advisory Council Meeting 5 fit into the process, and how does that help us make the link between looking at priorities, which we've been doing in Meeting 3 and 4, and then getting to goals, which we'll do in Meeting 6. We'll also take a quick minute for the schools that are participating in this webinar to share how the process is going in their school and maybe what meeting you had last and how that went for you. And then we'll start prepping for Meeting 5. And basically, we'll go through the manual tab. There are 3 things that you need to prepare before you get to the 5th meeting. The resources self-study, the non-program activities, and the time use log totals. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll walk through the handouts, specifically the PowerPoint that guides you through the meeting, and then look at the tools that are in the manual to help you get ready for Meeting 5. Then we'll very quickly look at the webcast tab to just kind of remind you that that's there as another resource. And then just kind of a heads up, our next webinar is scheduled for Monday, March 5th, and at that webinar we'll be actually setting the goals for next school year. So really all of the work that we've done so far, and including this Meeting 5, is to prepare us to set goals, which we'll do next month. So this meeting today is like one of my favorite meetings. It's where we get to expand resources. Because the thinking is that if we have more resources, then we can address more of the priorities that your school counseling advisory council has been developing over the last couple of meetings. So a little bit of review. First of all, just reviewing our beliefs. We believe the purpose of school counseling is to prepare students for academic success at the next educational level. I think that's the focus because we are school counselors. So it's our job to use our expertise in school counseling to help kids be successful at school. And this is how we believe school counseling impacts student achievement and does get students ready for success at the next educational level. Our belief is that when school counselors implement sound guidance and counseling programs, that as a result of those programs, that students will make different choices. And we're hoping the choices that students are making are choices that will enable them to be successful, really successful in life, but also successful at school. And then as a result of those choices, achievement will go up. So we call this our school counseling pyramid, and the focus is really on the student choices. We think school counseling, guidance and counseling activities really can have an impact on the choices that kids make, and then as a result of that, and a result also of everything else that goes on in the schools that teachers implement and principals implement, that those student choices will have an impact on student achievement. So this is the process that we've been using. The very first thing we did with y'all is you formed a school counseling advisory council. This was a broad-based council that had community members and parents and students and teachers and counselors on it. What we were trying to do is to bring lots of different perspectives to the table so that the decisions that were made about the design of your school counseling program would not just be based on those of the school counselors, but would be based on lots of different perceptions and backgrounds. The first thing you did is at Meeting 1, you did an introduction with your advisory council. The product for that meeting was a list of benefits for school counseling. Then you met with the council again for Meeting 2, and this is a meeting where you really talked about your dreams. You said, you know, collectively, do we all have a common vision for where we would like our school to be, where we would like kids to be academically, and then what we see the school counseling program doing to enable kids to get to that point. So this was kind of the dream step, and then after dreaming and coming up with a collective dream with your council, we then came back to look at, okay, what are the needs that kids have, or another way to look at this is what's interfering with our ability to reach that dream. So at meeting 3, you identified students' needs in terms of achievement. You asked yourselves where are kids not achieving in areas that we would need them to be achieving in order to be successful at the next educational level. And then we also looked here specifically at student choices, and this is where you brought in some data and looked at what choices are kids making that either open the door for academic success or close the door to academic success. Then in meeting 4, we did the same thing, except this time we looked at guidance and counseling. We also brought data to this meeting, and in the guidance area we looked at what knowledge and skills do kids have in academic development, career development, social personal development that would enable them to be successful at school. And then the counseling part, we looked at what social personal concerns do some kids have that make it difficult for them to be successful at school. And out of these 2 meetings where we identified needs, you've come up with 4 different priority lists. These are posters and also ended up being in our online system, but they're a list of your advisory council's priorities in terms of what do they think the biggest academic needs are of your students, what are the biggest areas that need to be impacted in terms of the choices that kids make, and then the guidance knowledge, and then the personal social counseling needs. So we're coming into this month's meeting with these 4 priority lists. And my guess is that if your school is like every other school that we've ever worked with, these 4 lists contain way too many things for you as school counselors to successfully address. There's way too many student choices that need to be impacted. There's way too much guidance knowledge and skills that we need to teach to every kid in the building. Way too many social personal needs for the school counselors to address them all. So what we want to do is start whittling down this list and to come up with eventually goals that are a subset of this list that we commit that we're going to impact. We know we can't impact all of these things, so we're going to narrow them down to come up with a smaller list of things that we do commit to impacting. But before we get the goals, we want to try to expand our resources, because we know that the more time and energy and resources that we have, the more things on these priority lists we can tackle. So that brings us to this month's meeting, which is to look at expanding our resources. And this is actually kind of a 2-step process. This month, the first thing we're going to do is we'll bring our advisory council information about all of the resources that we have. We'll bring them up to speed in terms of how much time we have, what our ratios are, what materials we have. We'll just do lots of talking about our resources. And then we'll suggest to them that if they can expand those resources, then they can then we'll be able to tackle more things on those 4 priority lists. So on step 6, then, we're looking at expanding the resources. Usually with our school counseling programs, the biggest resource that people find a shortage of is time. And so then we start brainstorming and getting creative about how can we get more time, or how can we work more efficiently in order to gain time. Sometimes it's not time. Sometimes the resource that's lacking is a healthy professional reputation. And so it's not that the school counselors don't know what to do, it's just that people don't have the perception that they know what to do, and so we've got that issue. Or sometimes it is resources. We don't have the materials, we don't have the funding that we need to drive our programs. So we'll work on expanding resources. That's this month. And then once we've expanded the resources, Then next month we'll come and we'll say, okay, realistically, what can we commit to? What are the students' goals going to be? Can we commit to increasing the percentage of kids who pass the algebra end of course assessment? Can we commit to increasing the percentage of kids who turn in their homework or who that understand where to find a FAFSA? So we're committing to these goal areas. Then at the 7th meeting, it will happen in April, we'll look at all the different types of activities that we can do to help us reach our goals. We'll decide which activities to put in. And then after that, that's the last meeting of the Advisory Council. Then on step 9, we're working independently without the Advisory Council. Now the counselors are saying, okay, we've got these activities that we're doing. We need to develop guidance lessons and an annual calendar and individual calendars and an annual budget to make these activities run in our school. So that's the process. And again, where we are today is we're working on expanding resources. So let's just take a minute very quickly to kind of share where your schools are right now. I know some of you are getting ready for meeting 5. I think a couple of you are just getting started, which is fine. But let's just kind of update real quickly. And I think Franklin Community Middle School, is Jerry with us? Bruce, did Jerry log in?
No.
Okay, so we'll pass Jerry. I know Jerry usually attends all of these Advisory Council meetings, so something must have come up. Milltown Elementary, Megan? Is Megan with us?
No.
Okay. How about Eastern High School? Yes, Kate.
This is Megan Smith. I'm with David's group.
Oh.
County. I'm sorry. I can go ahead and share real quick if you'd like.
Okay, please.
I've completed my 3rd and 4th meetings. I held them as one, and it went very well. There was a lot of good discussion, and I was very pleased with the turnout at the meeting.
Good. So I've always wondered about having those 2 meetings together. Did you find the content was just way overwhelming? How long did the meeting take? Was it a 2-hour meeting or?
Yes, it took about 2 hours. So it was a little bit long, but the people on my committee actually preferred combining the meeting to having 2 separate ones. They found it easier to come to just one long meeting.
Okay, good. And so you were happy with the turnout?
Yes.
And did students come to your meeting as well?
No, we didn't have students this time.
Okay. So what kind of community people did you have there?
We had a police officer from our town. We had one of our postal workers who also has a student in the school. And I think that was it. Oh, somebody from town council came as well, too.
Okay, good. Good. Okay, so we're off and running and we're ready for meeting 5. Good. Okay, so Eastern, Kate, where are you guys?
We had to combine 2 and 3, and then 3 and 4. We kind of did half of 3, and it actually worked out well. We kind of got the 2nd meeting. We reviewed what we had done in the 2-3 meeting and adjusted a couple things, and then moved on to the 4 because we were confused before the last webinar. So we kind of backtracked a little bit, but we have some really good ideas and a good list of things to go with from here. So we were able to kind of get into a groove during meeting 4 and get that taken care of.
Good. And happy with your turnout?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Any challenges that you had to address?
One of the challenges I think we've had kind of all year is getting people who are not in the school building to participate. That's been a difficulty. We haven't had parents that have wanted to volunteer or to be a part of the council or anything like that. Or if a couple of them have, and then they haven't shown up to all the meetings, so that's that kind of affects that point of view.
Any suggestions from the rest of you on how to lure parents in and keep them coming back?
Is anybody else having that issue?
Well, we
we've only had our first meeting, but I feel pretty confident about the parents that we had there that they will return. I think at our first meeting they really saw how much it was going to impact their student and the peers of their student, and just seeing that it was for the better of their children, you know, so they want to be in on it.
Good. One of the things that we've heard from other schools is that it really, really helps to do a phone call to people the day before the meeting to get them there. My school, when I did this, we had difficulty getting parents in the beginning, and I think it was partly because there wasn't a lot of trust at that point between the parents and the school. One of the things that we did is we decided that instead of asking parents to come in to see us, we decided that we would go out to the parents. So we started like inviting ourselves to church choir meetings in the community to just talk to people about what we're doing, and we hit some parents that way. I know that one of our schools in Terre Haute, they wanted to get community involvement, and they actually went to the factories during break time and sat down and talked with people during the break at the factories. So, I think getting that perspective is really important, because without it, you're just basing all decisions just on the counselor's perspective or your community perspective. I think having parents there is really important. So I encourage you to kind of really brainstorm about how to best do that. So, okay.
Is it okay to add people to this even if they haven't been there since the beginning?
Yes, absolutely. That's a really good question. That is kind of cumbersome, because it means that you've got to catch them up, because they won't be up to speed. So it's time consuming on your part. But I think probably every community that we've ever worked with has had to do that. You get most of the people you want in, but then here's this one representative of whatever group that you bring in late, and then you've got to catch them up. And then the other thing will happen is people will drop off, and then you'll be replacing them with representatives of certain groups, and then you've got to catch them up. But yes, that's perfectly okay, and it's likely to happen that you'll need to do that.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so that's Eastern. Southmont, is Southmont with us? Mary? Bruce, no Mary?
Not here.
Okay.
She left us.
Okay. David Campbell, David's here. David, how about Marengo?
Good. We had meeting 3, had good representation, both teachers, community members. We have 2 new students that are members. I think that meeting was difficult for students to get too engaged in the achievement data in particular. So I'm really looking forward to the next meeting, which we're doing meeting 4 this Wednesday, where we're talking about something I think people will be able to connect to a bit more, and will hopefully cause a little bit more discussion and input.
Mm-hmm. What are the ages of the kids on your advisory council?
We really chose that they're 5th and 6th graders.
Okay. Okay, good.
I was really reluctant in terms of picking someone in the lower grade elementary levels. I do think it's a little challenging at the elementary school level for meeting 3 in terms of student choice data. I mean, they're not making a lot of curriculum choices, so it's not quite as rich area to discuss as it probably is for middle school or high school.
Right, and one of the things that we realized, I've talked to some of you about this, is with the elementary survey report, we do not have a separate survey report for student choices. So you've had to figure that out on your own. What are the choices that kids make, and then come up with the data for that. We did talk with our programmer last week, and we'll be adding that. We just didn't have it, unfortunately, for you guys to be able to take advantage of. But we're looking at attendance data for the upper level kids, maybe homework completion, discipline referrals, percentage of kids who participate in class, that kind of stuff. So, but we've got the survey questions on there for the elementary kids. We just didn't get the report that would spit them out. So.
And I just went out and got some of that attendance data on my own.
Good, good.
That was one that I went ahead and decided to grab.
Perfect. A lot of that data, too, it is, you know, if you've done reading about student engagement or looked at some of the student engagement assessments, you know, really student engagement is all about choice. Do kids choose to ask questions? Do they choose to turn in their homework? Do they choose to participate in class? So that's the kind of thing we're looking for at the elementary level in terms of student choices. So, but good, good. I found it difficult to get our kids. They would come to meetings, but they were so shy about talking in front of the adults that we actually started meeting with the students separately. So it was just the kids. We had we ended up having like 2 advisory councils, one with just kids and one with just adults. And I think that really helped. And then after a while, because we didn't want to have 2 meetings, we wanted the other adults to hear what the kids were saying, we started prepping the kids for the meetings. We'd meet with them first, and we'd tell them what we were going to be talking about, and we'd give them a chance to get their ideas together. And then they would come to the advisory council with the adults, and that seemed to work really well for us. So, okay. Okay, so that's Marengo. Crawford County. So I've got the high schools in here, but I just learned that in Crawford County we're working with just the elementary schools, so I'll take that off. So I don't know, is it Cindy that's here with us? No, not Cindy. Anna?
I'm here.
Okay.
I guess.
So how are things going in Crawford County?
Well, I guess I'll let some of the elementary counselors speak to what's going on in their buildings. So, who wants to start? I already spoke. There we go.
I'm scheduled to have my 3rd meeting. I haven't had my 3rd meeting yet. I was out last week, but I'm rescheduling my 3rd meeting to work on student choices and achievement data.
Good. And what school's that?
Patoka.
Okay, good. How about Milltown?
That was me, Megan Smith. I spoke earlier about combining those 2.
Oh, that's right.
And then Leavenworth, it's Chris Copeland, and I think what I'm going to do is combine advisory meeting 3 and 4.
Okay, okay, yeah, that seemed to work out. So you'll have to let us know next month how that went. And who haven't we heard from? English?
Katrina's English is out. She'll be out until
She's on
maternity leave.
Okay, okay. Okay, but sounds like things are moving along. Okay, okay. Princeton, Carrie? Carrie is just getting started. You've had meeting 1, right, Carrie?
Yes, we have. We had it in January, and we had 19 people at our first meeting, which we were very pleased with. And what worked for us was we sent letters out before the holidays, and then we sent, I think, an email, and then we contacted some people personally or by phone. So we had a really nice turnout, and it seemed to be a huge focus on motivation and where it's dropping from middle school to high school. And we had great input from everybody, students, community members, parents, administration. So I feel like it was a really good start to get this program off the ground.
Good, good. Well, congratulations on having 19 people. That's a great start. So it sounds like a lot of energies there.
Yeah, I think so. And our students we picked or that we asked to be on were juniors because, you know, our goal is to submit this in 2013 June, May, June, you know, so
right.
to be with us throughout the whole time that we have it. So
good, good. Sounds wonderful. Very good. And Jessica, Triton Central? Jessica still there?
Jessica is not with us.
Okay. Okay, very good. Well, let's move on quickly to meeting 5. Congratulations to everybody for moving along this process. I do know that you've got a gazillion things on your plate, and it's hard to find the time to do these things. So it's just wonderful, and it's affirming to hear your reports. Meeting 5, there are three things that you need to prepare before we get to meeting 5. The first one is to tally up all the counselor time use logs. So all of your counselors in your department have been doing those logs since the beginning of the school year. And what we need to do now is just to add up all of those little cells for all of your counselors combined, and then figure out, do the calculation to figure out what percentage of your time you're spending in guidance and counseling and advocacy and program management and non-program. So you'll see in a minute how that works into the process, but that's something you'll need to do before you get to the meeting. Then the second one is a resources self-study. We have a self-study to help you come up with a report that you're going to give to your advisory council to help them understand what resources you have and that you don't have. And then last month we asked you to enter your non-program tasks into our system. And you'll need to be able to print out that report that lists all the non-program tasks that you're doing. That non-program task, there's actually no place in the process where you're scheduled to use that non-program task list, but 9 times out of 10, people will say, well, if you don't have enough time to spend in school in counseling and guidance activities, well, then what are you doing? And then you'll have that non-program task list to say, well, you know, here's what I'm doing. Or when you do the time use percentages, if you've got down on non-program tasks that you're spending 37% of your time, someone's going to ask you, well, what do you do that's non-program? And then you'll have that list of all those activities that your principal or your school board or superintendent is asking you to do that have nothing to do with guidance or counseling. I love this meeting because it really expands the time, in most cases, that you have available to work with kids and parents. So that's the prep ahead of time. Let's go now to the online system, and I'll show you where to find those things. And let's see, okay. So I'm logged in as Franklin Community Middle School, and I'm going to go over to the left to the manual tab, and I'm going to scroll down to meeting 5. Okay, so the non-program activity list, let's look at that one first. That's down in the tools, and if you click on that, it just pops up because you've already put the information in the computer. So you can see at Franklin Community Middle School, balancing class numbers, supervising after-school bus transfers, I-STEP administration, creating the master schedule. Those are activities that they've listed as their non-program tasks. So just as a reminder, the way that those got into the system is let me come back up here. In the Activities tab, you went in there, and on Activities, where it says Enter Program Activities, you click there, and then we're going to create an activity, and you just name the activity, you've described it, and then the activity type, you put in that it's a non-program activity, and then you're entering what months you do it in and who's responsible for doing it, and then if this is a new activity or an ongoing, and then once everything's filled in, you can just click the Save button. So the only kind of activity that we're entering right now are the non-program activities. After meeting 7, then we'll enter all the rest of the activities in, but right now we're just entering the non-program that you're doing. So that's the non-program, and I'm going to go back to the RSC manual and back to meeting 5. And the other part that you're preparing ahead of time is the resources self-study. If I click on that, it's a Word document. And I want to walk through this pretty quickly with you, but there are some points I want to just discuss. The first one is financial resources. This is asking you for an annual budget and then the number of students and then the per pupil expenditure for school counseling. We find that there are many counselors in Indiana that have no budget. So your annual budget would be 0, and then your per pupil expenditure would be 0. A lot of counselors tell us they have no budget, but they'll just, if they want something, they'll just go ask their principal. So that's not a budget. So if you're on that kind of setup, your annual budget is 0. So then on human resources, in this section, and I'm going to slow down on this part a little bit because this could get a little confusing. On the human resources, on counselor time use, the first one where it says desired time use, that you're not going to put anything in because during the meeting, we'll have your advisory council come up with their desired use of your time. And so we don't know what they're going to say yet, so we have to leave that part blank. Then, before you get to your meeting, though, you will have added up all your time and task logs. And here's where you will write down what the actual is. So your 40% on guidance, your 30% on counseling, whatever your percentages work out to.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I do 9 and 10, and the other counselor does 11 and 12, and we've been looking at our time use logs, and it seems like all the things that I spend a lot of time in, she spends little time in, and vice versa. Is it okay to enter those separately, or do you really want us to total it?
Yeah, no, I would total it because you're talking about your program as a whole, okay. But it also, in many cases, makes sense that one counselor might be spending their time a lot differently than another counselor. It depends a little bit on how you, how you assign tasks to counselors. For example, in our program at Indian Creek, one of our counselors did nothing but responsive mental health counseling. So she had absolutely no time on guidance because that was not part of her job description. She had all of her time on counseling. And the counselors that are assigned to the upper grades, where we're really looking at college applications and financial aid and college admissions, they're probably going to have a higher time percentage on guidance than counselors at lower levels. Elementary counselors are probably going to have a much higher percentage maybe on counseling than guidance because they're not into all the college admissions stuff yet. But when you take all the counselors and you put them together, then you get a complete picture of your program. We've also had some schools tell us that for whatever reason, there may be one of the counselors who really likes to do the non-program stuff, is really kind of working as a junior principal, and that counselor, may have a very high percentage of non-program tasks, where another counselor might have, high percentages of guidance and counseling. But when you add everybody's together, then again, you get a complete picture of what the program is. Okay. So yeah, something to think about there. Okay, now, in terms of the number of licensed school counselors, notice that this says adjusted full-time equivalency. Here's what we're going to do. Well, here's what we're trying to avoid. A lot of schools will say, we have one full-time counselor in our building. But when we look at the counselor is really being used as a half-time junior principal or a half-time secretary, and the counselor is really a half-time counselor and not a full-time counselor, even though they're called a full-time counselor. So we're going to adjust the full-time equivalency to reflect the reality of the situation, and here's how we're going to do it. So for each licensed school counselor, and again, the key word here is unlicensed because we're talking about the number of school counselors. We're going to determine the counselor's full-time FTE, and what we'll do is if there's a full-time counselor, we'll say that their FTE is going to start at 1. If it's an elementary counselor, for example, that spends 2 days in a building, then that counselor's FTE is 2 out of 5 days, so it's a 0.4 FTE. So first of all, we're going to just figure out how much time is that counselor in the building. Then we're going to determine while the counselor is in the building, what percentage of the counselor's time is spent performing program activities. So what we would do is, this is when we're getting kind of into the individual counselors, we would say, okay, up here in that counselor's actual, this counselor maybe was spending 20% of their time doing non-program. So they had 80% of their time actually doing school counseling activities. So we would take the FTE and we would multiply it times the percentage of time that the counselor actually spends performing program activities. So if I had let's give an example. If I had an elementary counselor that was only in a building 2 days a week, then they would be a 0.4 FTE. But then if that counselor only spent 80% of their time doing school counseling program tasks, then I would take that 0.4, I would multiply it by 80%, and that would come up with the adjusted FTE. So again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, how much time is this counselor in the building? And then while they're there, what percentage of their time are they actually performing school counseling tasks? For when we first did this in a statewide study, we found that there were, we thought we had full-time counselors in Indiana. After we took out all the time for the non-program tasks, we found out that this was in the late 80s, but we only had half-time counselors. So we want you to do that for all the counselors in your building, and then add up the adjusted FTEs for all the licensed counselors, and that will tell you exactly, how many, time-wise, how many school counselors you have in your building. So I know I went through that explanation pretty quickly. I think the words here kind of explain what to do, but if you get stuck, give us a call, and we'll help you do that calculation. So that's going to give us our adjusted FTE for all of the counselors in the building. Then we're going to look at how many students do we have in the building, and then we'll figure out the counselor to student ratio. So we're going to take number 3, the number of students, we're going to divide it by number 2, the adjusted FTE, and that will give you your accurate counselor to student ratio based on your practice, not on your title. So, okay, so that's that. Then the next section, again, just reminding you what we're doing here is a self-study on the resources that you have. This section is asking you to report on what support resources are available in your school. And these are programs that are available in addition to your school counseling program. So for guidance resources, it may be something like you have a teacher advisor program where your teachers are delivering guidance curriculum. Or maybe you have a health course where you have, in your health course, your health teachers are teaching kids social personal skills. So, so you would list those in here, and then the percentage of the student body that's served. If it's a teacher advisor program that hits all kids, it would be 100%. If it's a high school and not all kids take health, or I guess all kids would take health. Maybe this is a family and consumer science course that not all kids take. It might not be 100%. And then in counseling resources, I think this is probably be less apt to find counseling resources outside of school counseling. But there may be that a community mental health agency is coming in your school, or maybe you have interns in your school that are providing counseling resources. So that would list that in that section. And again, in this section, we're talking about school support, things that happen in your school building. Okay, then in the next section, we're talking about community support. So what guidance resources are in your community? Maybe your Boys and Girls Club does do career development activities, or maybe your mental health agency provides group counseling for kids. Maybe your scouting program in your community does career development. I think the Boy Scouts have a merit badge on career development. So what guidance resources are available in the community? Then in the next section, we're looking at space resources. So you're just checking off spaces that you have in the Next section, we're asking about technology, and then just what materials do you have? You know, what computer programs do you have that kids use, or CDs, or books, or whatever? And then finally, what are your annual supplies? You know, what kind of things that you have? Professional development. We did a study a while ago about professional development that counselors participate in, and we're kind of found it interesting that the majority of school counselors did not participate in professional development, which for a variety of reasons. I think a lot of times they tell us they can't get out of their building or whatever. So here, what we're asking to do here is, does the school provide annual funds for counselors to participate? Yes or no? If yes, how much? And then you would write down each counselor's name, and then just check off the things that they participate in, and there's blanks for you to write your own. Then the last thing is the program perceptions resource. This is back in the survey, on the survey results, one of the reports that you can print is the kids' perceptions of the school counselors, and that you would just attach to this report. And I always have to say kind of a word of caution on this. We've had some very, very, very good school counseling programs. I'm thinking of one that I think is one of the top programs in the state. But the first time they did this survey, the students gave the counselors very, very low marks. They said the counselors didn't care about them. They said the counselors didn't know what they were doing. And these were good counselors. What the counselors had to do was to get together and talk about, what does this mean? You know, do we not know what we're doing? Do we not care about the kids? Or do we know what we're doing and care about the kids, but we just have a perception problem? So in this case, they decided it was a perception problem, and they decided to implement activities as part of their school counseling reform to help students and parents understand what the counselors are capable of doing, and helping everybody understand that, yes, we do care about kids. The counselor's thinking was that if people perceive that the counselors don't care about kids, they're not going to come in to, the kids won't come in to talk with the counselors, or the parents won't encourage the kids to go talk to the counselors. So we think your reputation is a resource that's very valuable. And if it's not where it needs to be, then that may be part of the activities that you implement as you go through redesigning school counseling to adjust that perception. And the program that I was thinking of earlier, that's what they did, and successfully so. So don't, I guess I wouldn't, get real upset if the kids don't rate you high in this area. But if they don't rate you high, I do think that that is a reason to do some thinking about, what does that mean? Is it a perception problem, or is it reality? We really don't care about the kids as much as maybe they would like us to. So, okay, so that's that. Now, let me go back to the online system. So that's the prep that we're talking about. Let me go to, in the handouts, the presentation very quickly. Let's see, it's this one. And actually, I think I already have that open. Okay, so not a lot of slides. And again, I think this is a fairly easy activity to facilitate. And my favorite one, because I think hopefully this will be rich discussion, and you'll end up with more time and resources. Okay, so the first thing we're doing, because we haven't met with people for a month, we're just going to go through the process again, and just like we did at the beginning of this webinar, and kind of go through where we are. I pause on meeting 5. We're going to expand resources before we set our goals, because we know the more resources we have, the more goals we're able to tackle. And then going on to meeting 7 with activities, and then after that, the counselors will prepare for implementing those activities. Okay, so now we're talking about priorities, and we're reminding people that at the last 2 meetings, we set all these priorities, and what we suggest to you in the facilitator's guide is that you bring those posters that you've developed in the last 2 meetings, and the Instagraphs, and you just plaster them all over the room, and then you can point to them and say, look at all of these look at all of these priorities that you have, all of these needs that kids have. And what we want to do here is expand resources so we can address as many of these needs as you brought to the table as we possibly can. So what we're going to do today is, again, to obtain as many resources as possible so we can address as many priorities as possible. And task one is to determine, ideally, how would we like the school counselors to spend their time. If you're in a program where you're doing a lot of non-program tasks, this is a great activity, one, to expose that, and then also to get people to start thinking very creatively about what to do. So in these Instagraphs, the Instagraphs look like this. There's 5 of them, and this is really, I love this activity. This is really cool. So you've got one of these Instagraphs for guidance, then there's another poster for counseling, one for advocacy, one for management, one for non-program. And so what you're asking people to do is, before they come up to the Instagraphs, just ask them to write down those 5 words, guidance, counseling, advocacy, management, non-program, and say, what percentage of time do you think the school counselor should spend in each of those tasks? And they may say 40% in guidance and 20% in counseling. Each person will have their own opinion. And then, and I always joke with them and say, now, the percentage of time cannot add up to greater than 100%. Please check to make sure that you're not overextending our counselors. We only have 100% of our time. So then, as people are building these Instagraphs, on each of the 5 Instagraphs, so each person will walk up to each of the 5 Instagraphs and they'll put their little sticky dot on. And what you'll end up building is pretty much a bell curve on each of the Instagraphs where one spot is it will spike. And you'll kind of see where that is as those sticky dots get put on. Then what you'll find is that at the top of each of these bell curves, if you add them up from all the 5 sheets, they'll add up to 100%. So that is a real quick way for the group to tell you where they would like you to be spending your time and energy. I can almost guarantee you that nobody's going to say that you should be spending 70% of your time doing non-program tasks. They're going to want that to be down to 5% or whatever. So later, you'll contrast the group's, the group's desires for how do you spend your time with the actual data from your time task logs, and you'll be able to see, how close are we to the desirable, and then that will give you a kind of fuel for a discussion about, how are we going to get more time to spend on counseling or guidance or whatever. Okay, so that's that. In that section. And so we're doing that part. Then the next slide is asking you to review the resources self-study. Okay, so you've already filled out the resources self-study, and you have, in this top part, you've put in here your actuals, okay? But now that you've done the Instagraphs, now you can fill in here the desires. And that will help people to see how maybe the time uses are not exactly where you'd like it to be. Normally what we see here is that the desire is that you're spending 0 to 5% of your time on that program. And depending on your program, it might be 40% of your time you're doing things that have nothing to do with guidance or counseling. So then the community will start to say, well, what's up with that? And here's where they'll ask you, well, what are you doing in that 40% of your time? But you've got that list prepared that you'll be able to take to, show them that these are all the non-program tasks that we do. It just is a great discussion. This is in my school. This has been where the community turned to the principal and said, this isn't acceptable. We find somebody else to do that stuff because we've got all these posters on the wall. And we want our school counselors to be working with kids and parents. We want to address all these issues on the wall. So rich discussion in this part. Okay, so then people are going through the report and they're highlighting. I like to just have a yellow highlighter for everybody that's there, and they're highlighting parts of the report that they think are getting in the way of delivering a sound school counseling program because we don't have the resources. Then they're completing a resource infographic. That looks like this. And what we've done here is these are the different parts of that self-study. And we're just asking people to come up to this infographic and say, you know, of everything that you learned about on that self-study, what are the ones that concern you the most? Is it the counselors don't have enough time? Is it the budget? Whatever. So people are putting their sticky dots on or putting their X's in. These bar graphs will grow out to the side. They'll grow horizontally. So that kind of tells you, you know, what people are most concerned about in terms of your lack of resources. And then the next slide has them complete an action plan, and this is the coolest thing. So now we're saying to people, okay, you have these concerns about the lack of resources that the counselors have. What are we going to do about it? So the action plan looks like this, and we've got these X's you would have filled in current time use, and then we'll say, okay, what's the targeted time use for next year? You'll work that out with the advisory council. And then this, you'll say, if on your resources infographic, the thing that got the most votes was time, you would write time in here. And then are we going to change that next year? Yes. And then what's the plan? In my school, when we did this, in a lot of schools report this back to us, but in my school specifically, I remember the athletic director stood up and said, you know, I can administer ISTEP. And another teacher said, I can do high school graduation and all the prep for that during my prep. And the community person said, you know, I'd be happy to take over this thing that you do. So it's just a real good way to, you know, to show people that there is an issue here. There's a lack of time, and get everybody to kind of brainstorm about how you can address some of these lack of resources. If your lack of resources is a lack of funding, we've had schools where businesses will say, you know, we can donate $1 per kid. And, you know, that can get you buy several resources if that's where the shortage is. So what we come out with then is this resources action plan, and then that becomes part of the Redesigning School Counseling, because in order to tackle as many goals as we can at the next meeting, we've got to expand the resources first. So that's the goal at this meeting, and that's it. So basically, we're studying resources, we're determining which lack of resources are getting in the way the most, and then we're coming up with an action plan for expanding those resources. There may be some things that are impossible, like you probably in this day and age cannot go out and hire 3 new counselors, additional counselors. But I think you'll find that once people see all those priorities on those posters, and they're there because they love kids, they're going to want to help you figure out creatively how to expand those resources, because they know that if they do, then you'll be able to tackle more goals at your next meeting. So I know I'm over a little bit. I'm just about to wrap down. Okay, and so in meeting 5, you've got your, for the handouts, you've got your cover page, the agenda, the process diagram, the PowerPoint, the self-study, that's the one you would have filled out ahead of time. And then the resources action plan is actually a poster, but we think it's helpful for people to be able to look at it in front of them, so we put in an 8.5 by 11 copy of that there. Then in your tools for meeting 5, we've got the prep, the facilitator notes that talks through everything that we've just said in this webinar. Famous Peers is a handout that you need for a warm-up if you're going to do the warm-up that we provide. Then you've got the 5 instagraphs in terms of balancing your program, where they want you to be spending your time. Your resources instagraph, your resources action plan. Here's the non-program activity list. You just click on that and it shows up. And then I did want to go over with you tasks following meeting 5. There really is not a lot of follow-up after meeting 5. It's just the resources action plan, and that you've developed at the meeting. So we're going to drop some additional tasks in after meeting 5. So as follow-up to 5, you're going to send meeting minutes out, then you're going to put your minutes online, put your resources action plan online. And notice over here in format, so far I think everything we've done has been online. This time we're going to start uploading documents. I'll show you how that works in just a sec. And then on additional portfolio inserts, school counseling program brochure, that's one of the requirements for both Gold Star and the ASCA Ramp Award. It doesn't have anything to do with meeting 5. It's just an additional thing that we're suggesting would be good to work on now. The Indiana School Counselor Association has some samples. There's their website. And notice again, this is an upload. It's not a form on the web site that you're going to fill in, but you're going to do something in a Word doc and then you're going to upload it. Public relations, one of the requirements for Gold Star is that you do public relations for your program. Here's some examples of things you could have: a newspaper article, an agenda from a community meeting where you presented your program, presentation handout, but just somehow you've advocated for your program. So just make a copy and then upload it. Job descriptions. There's sample job descriptions in our manual. It's document C19, so you can start with that, or if you have one already, that's just upload what you already have. Professional association. We need you to send some kind of proof that at least one of your counselors is a member of a professional association. So you can send a copy of a current membership card, or if you get like the Ask a Counselor that's got the mailing label on the front of it, just make a copy of the cover of the magazine with the mailing label on it, the publication with the mailing label, and then upload that. Professional development, conference program. What we're doing right now is professional development. So an agenda from an RSC workshop, it would be fine. Or a copy of the email that we've sent you about the webinars would be fine. Just upload that so there's some proof that you're participating in professional development. Then professional networking. This means that your counselors in your school are talking to other counselors. So if you participate on Counselor Talk and you've ever sent out anything on Counselor Talk asking for input, you could just make a copy of that email, and that would work. If you meet with the counselors in your county monthly, I know a lot of counselors do that, just an agenda from that meeting. Or if you have regular meetings in your school of your counselors, you could do an agenda from one of your school counseling meetings in your school. But just somehow that something that's going to show that your counselors aren't isolated, that you're talking with each other and there's collegiality between you. And then the final one is the counselor time task logs. ASCA wants to see, in Gold Star 2, they want to see not all of your time task logs for every week for every counselor. That would be a gazillion pages. But just one time task log for each semester for each counselor. So if you have 2 counselors in your building, each of you would have a first semester time log and a second semester time log, so 4 logs altogether. I would just put them all into one Word document or into a PDF file with 4 pages and just upload that as one document. So, okay, so that's it. Last thing, in terms of uploading these things, in the portfolio contents, these are places where you've been entering things online. Anytime you see in the Enter Edit column a little pen, that means that there's actually a form online that you're filling in. But some of the things now you're putting them in as an upload, like the Counselor Effectiveness Self-Study. You would do that as a Word document, save it, and then click the upload icon and see how that's an arrow going up, that's upload. and then you would browse your own computer, click on that document in your computer, and it would appear in there, and then click upload, and that will send it to the system. The nice thing about that is once you've uploaded it, then it will be there. So if you want to open it, you can just go in the report column and click it, and that document will be saved on our system, and then it will just open for you. Okay, so I think that's it. I know I'm over a little bit. I apologize. Any quick questions? Okay, I appreciate your time, and again, congratulations on getting your meetings going, and it sounds like I'm thrilled that so many of you have a significant number of advisory council members there. I'm also very pleased that you're adjusting our agendas and our materials to meet your needs. I think that's a good thing. So we will talk with you then at our next webinar in March. So thank you very much.
Sue?